One of the things you're going to need to decide when going from a hunting bow to a target bow, or like I've said in this series, a hybrid bow, you're going to have to choose your arrow shaft. Now it's totally up to you to stick with what you hunt with and what you use all year. However, if you've reduced your poundage so that you can get in those extra reps like we covered at the beginning of the series, then there's a very good chance the spine of your arrows is going to be a little bit stiff for your setup anyway. So to get the best accuracy, you're going to want to find a spine that matches that lower poundage. Now, just to give you an example of where I would start and where I'll finish, just based on past experiences and depending on the type of application, I've got a bunch of different arrows here that are all for different types of purposes. They're all different diameters, they're all different overall weights, but each one of these has definitely served a purpose at some time. Now right here is probably my most common arrow that I hunt with. This is an Axis 300. It's got 3-inch max stealth vanes on it. It's got a brass insert. It's a heavy arrow, about 520 grains. Now this arrow for this application is going to be a little bit heavy, a little bit slow. To be honest with you, these larger max stealth vanes, especially in a 4-fletch like this, for a bow that I'm going to be shooting in the mid 60s for poundage, it's probably going to have more wind drift than if I made a different type of option. Now, some of these larger diameter shafts here are very specific for either indoor archery, which this aluminum 2315 right here is my favorite indoor arrow. So the times where I'm shooting indoor leagues or my indoor training where you see me shooting 3-spot rounds, I'm normally shooting a larger aluminum arrow like this with a little bit bigger fletch on it. It's indoors. I'm not worrying about wind. I'm just wanting that large diameter to help me a little bit with score. It's a very stable arrow. Again, probably not the most ballistically advantageous. However, for indoor archery at a fixed distance, this is a very good shaft choice. Now, if I was shooting 3D archery and I'm going to be shooting in those mid distances, so let's say up to 50 or 60 yards, where there is going to be some wind, but certainly not as much as you possibly could have at an event like a Total Archery Challenge where you're shooting across canyons, much further distances, I probably wouldn't shoot this all carbon shaft, even though it's a bigger diameter. Very popular for 3D. So if you're going to be shooting local 3D leagues where you're going to be shooting, sub 60 for distance, this is going to be a light arrow, fast arrow. It's going to not be the best that you can get in the wind, but it is going to have some advantages when it comes to 3D archery. Now, if we're talking pure ballistics, the best out there is this Pro Tour. So this is an X10 Pro Tour. This is one that I would shoot for, say, field rounds, feet of field rounds, very small diameter, very heavy in weight. However, the diameter is super small. I could shoot a very small fletch on it. I'll have a pretty heavy point weight in there, but the overall weight of this arrow is still substantially less than my hunting arrows, so I'm able to still get some pretty good speed with it. Now, the other options are going to be, for example, last year when I shot the Total Archery Challenge, I decided to stay with an Axis arrow, but I went down to a lighter spine, which is going to be lighter in mass weight, and I also went to a very small PM 2.0 fletch so that I had less drag and less wind drift. I also went with a little bit less in the front weight just so that I had a little bit faster arrow. Now, when it comes to momentum or, kinetic energy, that lighter version of that arrow probably wouldn't be the best for large game, but when it comes to shooting reps, target archery, it's a great option. Now, lastly, I wanted to point out these full metal jackets, which is actually what I'm currently shooting right now, because what I like about these is they do still have some weight. It is a small diameter. It's not a micro diameter, but it is still a small diameter. It's a 5mm arrow. But what I like about it is the aluminum jacket is actually a lot easier to pull. out of the targets than if you're shooting a fast carbon. So just for wear and tear on your body for pulling arrows continually, the FMJ is actually a really cool option. But what I'm doing is I'm going to a little bit lighter point weight, so I'm not going to shoot the heavier brass for this type of, training. And I'm also going to a smaller vane on the back of the shaft, which also is going to have its advantages too. So you have the ability to choose a ton of different arrow shafts based on what you're doing, but what you're going to make sure you do is you have to check that arrow chart and make sure that now that you're shooting that lighter poundage, you can go down to a spine that's going to match that so that you're going to have the best accuracy. Now, we're certainly going to do some other videos showing you how spine affects grouping, but most important for right now is for you to just consider, what is it that I'm after? Am I after that short game, indoor shooting, going to a league at my local shop? A larger diameter aluminum arrow with a big fletch that's going to steer quick could be an awesome option. You could also go to a larger diameter all carbon shaft that's faster, it's lighter. You could also change the fletching on that as well. Or if you're going to be shooting 3Ds, you're going to be in those mid distances, up to 50 yards. You obviously have options with an FMJ. You can go with that larger all carbon fat boy shaft. Or if you decide, hey, I'm going to be shooting, 70, 90 meter stuff, or I'm going to go out and I'm going to be shooting a lot of field rounds in a lot of different terrain, then at that point you might want to step up and try several different type of super small diameter shafts that are heavier in mass weight, but about half the size of what you're used to as a hunter. Lastly, just go with a hunting shaft that is slightly modified so that you can still get good speed, you can have great flight, less drag downrange, and honestly, all of these things are going to have their advantages, disadvantages. If you have a bow where you can have some reps and you can go out and do some of this shooting, then you're going to find out what that arrow really does downrange. And one of the things that would be a great experiment is to sight in at a longer distance and try some of these different weight arrows and just see how they perform at that longer distances. Do the same thing in the wind and see how a micro diameter shaft versus a middle or a larger diameter shaft performs in the wind. You're going to find the perfect arrow combination for you.